Welcome aboard. It is episode 92 of the J.R. Hoeft Show, and I am pleased to be joined by Delegate Jason Miyares, the Republican candidate for Attorney General here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. As you can expect, we do talk about the campaign and his differences between the incumbent Attorney General Mark Herring and himself. But we also get into discussions on public policy, what it is like to be an American, what some of the things that are fundamentally important to us, and what are some of the issues that are fundamentally important to us, regardless of your partisanship. Jason talks a lot about his background, about where he comes from, and what makes him the kind of person he is today. He is not an ideologue by any stretch of the imagination, and you will understand that as we go throughout the course of this conversation. And quite frankly, he is a personal friend of mine, and I think obviously that will come through in the course of the discussion. But we cover a lot of ground in this podcast, and you're going to want to watch it all. So without further ado, let's get underway with Jason Miyares. Jason Miyares, Delegate Jason Miyares, Attorney General candidate Jason Miyares, my friend Jason Miyares. How are you doing?
Great to be with you, Jim. It's been too long, and I appreciate all your friendship and advice over the years, and it's good to see and hearing that you're doing so well, and it's great to finally get connected. I know you may have been traveling more than I have the last couple of weeks, but it's great that we finally get connected.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that folks will eventually learn about the day job as the podcast goes on, for sure. But no, I am honored that you are able to take some time out of what I know is a extremely hectic schedule. I am sure the last year has gone by like an absolute blur for you. But honestly, I knew that you would eventually run for higher office, statewide office, because you just have that talent, that skill set. But
oh, wow.
I wasn't necessarily certain it was going to be after your third term or during your third term in the House of Delegates that you would make that decision. So tell me about that. Yeah, why Attorney General?
Wow, I got to tell you, it was a difficult thing to wrestle with, to be candid with you. I had been asked to run for Congress more than once before, and I've always said no, because I have said that as much as I enjoy serving in the House of Delegates, I enjoy the title of daddy a heck of a lot more. And I've said before, there's nothing I'm going to do on this earth that will in any way match the legacy of being the father to my three daughters. And so I take that role incredibly serious, and so it was a difficult thing to kind of walk through, to be honest with you. I had several people starting last spring and summer of 2020. Gosh, it feels like a lifetime ago, to really encourage me. And they came to me, and the best I could tell, it wasn't coordinated. It was different people that said, listen, we really think you have a unique voice for within the Republican Party, and perhaps in Virginia. And then I was really wrestling with it. It was not an easy thing to work through. I kind of viewed it as, I was in a position where I love serving Virginia Beach. I mean, I have being a delegate has been one of the great honors. And, I've said to you before, but it's never lost on me that the fact that my mother fled communist Cuba in the October of 1965, leaving a country with no consent to govern, and was literally homeless. And almost 50 years to the day that she left, in the fall of 2015, she was able to walk into a voting booth and get my name on a ballot, and was able to vote for her own son to represent her in the oldest democracy in the Western Hemisphere. Boy, that has always stood with me. As I call it, the American miracle. I just think it is. And but ultimately it was a conversation. What kind of moved me on this path was a conversation I had with my mother the Friday night before the election last year, where if you know anything about Cuban Americans, we tend to be pretty passionate people, but we're not afraid to talk politics.
No,
or religion, I guess.
Sure.
But
there you go.
But it was the first time talking to her about the political climate in America that I heard that she was scared. And that was a really weird thing. It's hard. And my father left home when I was a teenager. So it's hard when you hear your mother scared. That doesn't sit right with you as a son. So I remember asking, he's like, Mamita, what's going on? You clearly you weren't a fan of Bill Clinton. You weren't a fan of Barack Obama, but I've never heard you scared over either one of those, the two previous Democratic presidents. Why, trying to peel back the onion a layer, why are you scared? And, she said, I never thought the language and the rhetoric and the tactics that I used to see in Havana, Cuba, I would see turning on the nightly news, the demonization of people, the tearing down of statues, the disrespecting of law enforcement, and the cancel culture, right? The stifling of free speech or the free exchange of ideas. She's like, that's the first time I've seen these same tactics. And as she said, I've seen this play before. And as she said, I'm 74 years old. I'm too old to ever go through that again. And that, I remember getting off the phone with her while I was driving home, clear as day. I was driving home, left by law practice, and was checking in on her. And I remember just getting home, and I was just really quiet, just processing the whole thing. And, my wife obviously telling that there was just something kind of heavy on my mind. And I was just telling her, that was just a really remarkable conversation I just had with my mom. And that kind of really was what pushed me over from the likely not to run to, I think I'm probably going to do this. Because I felt like it was an easy thing for me to sit back and say, hey, I'm serving in the House of Delegates. I, have a great life. I have a great life. Why would I try to upset the apple cart? And that kind of was what kind of pushed me then to decide to run. And so kind of spent the month of November kind of working through some things and then announced December 2nd. So, and then we're off, and it's been a heck of a journey. I'll tell you that. It's been a lot of fun, but a lot of hours in the back of a car. I'll tell you that.
The conversation with your mom, obviously the impetus, but talk about that follow-on conversation with your wife, Paige.
My wife's pretty remarkable because, first of all, she has a wonderful gift of discernment and great judgment. Great discernment and great judgment. And there's also nothing about politics impresses her. Just fantastic. I mean, literally nothing. Her father was the city treasurer of Virginia Beach, and she kind of grew up around it. We met working on George Allen's 2000 Senate race. And so, Tom Clancy has a great quote where he says, politics is Hollywood for ugly people. I guess that would apply. But
to some more than others.
Right. But, you do. And I have met people like that on both sides of the aisle that are more interested in somehow getting their name in the paper or making a soundbite or, getting on cable news than actually doing something substantive. And so there's nothing about it. And anybody who's actually been a candidate will tell you there's nothing glamorous about it. That's for darn sure. I mean, it's you're on the road all the time. You're away from your family. You're oftentimes not eating great food on the road. But it's also a joy because for me, I'm a people person. I always love to ask people, tell me your story. And what I found pretty consistently is, man, we're a country filled with remarkable people. I have said before that part of what I want to run for and represent is I call them the quiet heroes. I think you'd recognize that we have this misnomer in our culture where if you can memorize a movie script or read off a teleprompter or have a name on the back of a jersey, well, you're a celebrity and we're going to treat you like it. You're a hero, and we're going to follow every word you say, every tweet you make, everything you do. We're going to really zero in on you. And the people that are those quiet heroes are the ones that they never get any recognition. It's the personal stories I've heard. It's the single mom that was told last year, was working 2 jobs. Hey, leave your 9-year-old daughter behind in front of a computer screen for 8 hours a day, and that's a quality education, Or the young cop who, every day, I go to work, you go to work, we put on a coat and tie. He goes to work, he puts on a bulletproof vest. That's what he has to do to go to work, and it's the small business owner who, he's the first to get there in the morning, the last to leave at night, just cares for his employees, but every day he sees some new regulation. Those type of quiet heroes, boy, they feel abandoned right now. They just do.
And they have
it's frustrating.
And it should be. And this is why there's so many of us who appreciate the fact that you did step up to the plate and you have started to make this sacrifice, continued sacrifice. House of Delegates is no joke too. But again, a statewide campaign is, major leagues. It's a new level for sure of travel and staying away from your family. But so you're doing this service thing and you're doing it because, quite frankly, the dude that's been in there for nearly what, 8
years,
8 years now, wanting to serve for 12, has sort of treated it as his own personal soapbox for his own pet issues, as opposed to necessarily serving what I would consider the point of the office. It seems like he's been more activist in the office. So talk about what the position of Attorney General actually is. What do you see your role if you were afforded the opportunity to be in that office?
Well, it is an office that carries 2 hats. You're both considered Virginia's top cop. Mark Herring has referred to himself as Virginia's top cop. And so you are both kind of the top law enforcement official in the state. You handle every single criminal appeal in the state, goes through your office. You have original jurisdiction on all computer crimes. You do a host of joint task force, special prosecutions, things of that nature. So you're both, and for me, human trafficking is something that is a strong interest for me to combat. So you do a lot in the law enforcement realm. And I think that's critically important, and I'll be glad to go into where Mark Herring has failed.
Oh yeah, we're going into your background and then, his background.
And then you're also the top lawyer for the state. You have a staff of over 200 attorneys. You represent all of these different agencies, including the parole board, providing advice for these different government agencies. But there's another aspect of the job that really is tied in directly to Washington. If there's anything that has been transformative in D.C. the last 40 years, has been the growth of the administrative state. And so what has happened is you have all these federal agencies, whether it's Department of Labor, pick your federal agencies, and literally every month they are promulgating rules and regulations that have the same, that's the sound of freedom if you're hearing it, Jed.
That's awesome. Love it. I can hear it. That's too cool. I live very close to Langley Air Force Base.
All right.
We get the sound up here. Yeah. That's right. But
are the F-22s as loud as the Super Hornets?
No.
Really?
I think they fly higher. That might be a thing.
Interesting.
But when I was down in Chesapeake, the sound of freedom was definitely there with Fentress. We heard it loud and clear there. But
yeah,
you were saying.
But what I was saying is, the changes happened in Washington, D.C. the last 40 years. You have these federal agencies that promulgate all these rules and regulations that had this full force effect of law that impact you or your business. But your congressman and your senator, they never vote on them. And your governor can maybe complain about them, but that's it. The only people that can actually go in the court and challenge them when they overreach are your state attorney generals. And that is a huge role that office has taken, I think, added importance as you have the growth of what they call the administrative state. Because the dirty little secret in Washington is Congress has largely stopped passing laws. You have a lot of people in D.C. that are more interested in going on MSNBC or Fox and doing their little soundbite. They don't actually pass laws. They basically shove this off to these administrative agencies and say, you go pass the rules and regulatory bodies. And so it's a great way for Congress to duck their responsibility. But what it has meant is this growth of these federal agencies that, you could say some people may find that great. I view that you're losing some basic accountability there. And I think the Attorney General has a very important role there as well. And the last, I think, is absolutely recognizing individual freedom and individual dignity. It was an odd thing for me during the height of the pandemic last year, where this governor, by executive fiat, he wasn't consulting the General Assembly, he wasn't calling the General Assembly back into session. He was issuing executive orders saying, listen, your liquor store can remain open. That's essential. But your house of worship had to remain closed.
Yeah.
And we are in Virginia, the birthplace of the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom. And I just thought, where's our Attorney General at this point? The idea that you could summarily shut down houses of worship, I don't care what your faith background is. That to me seemed like broad executive overreach by the governor. And of course, Attorney General Herring did nothing to stop it. So I think that's a notable role of the Attorney General as well.
Yeah, and I think if you were going to unpack that particular issue, which we don't have to, I don't think we should, but a house of worship obviously covered under the First Amendment, the right to actually own a business and to practice your business, obviously constitutionally protected. But at the same time, I guess what I would say is if you're going to make those broad brush fiats, as you said, in the name of health and safety, it should apply to everybody, and not just a one size fits all situation. And I think by targeting faith groups, organizations that obviously gather, right, and you have a congregation where the possible spread from one person to another could happen if not practicing social distancing and masking and the like. I can see where they were coming from on that, but I don't quite understand why, again, one size, it wasn't a nuanced, and it wasn't well implemented. It wasn't well practiced. And it was very disappointing. It's still disappointing for me. It's impacted us as a faith family as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think every Virginian has been and remains, I think, anxious about COVID. And I've said, you can't mask your way out of this pandemic. People are going to have to get vaccinated. And I'm vaccinated. My wife's vaccinated. Our two oldest daughters that are eligible have gotten vaccinated. And I think that's important. You have to get vaccinated. But I also think people recognize that these are decisions people have to make on their own. I literally just got the phone earlier today from a concerned father who his daughter works at a bank that is, and with the Biden administration new rules, his daughter has been hesitant. She's in great health. She's 22, 23 years old, and she didn't feel comfortable, that she wants to make those decisions. And, now there's a government mandate. And so that everybody has to reach those conclusions on their own. And I think it's the quickest way. I tell people, when I talk to my daughters, I said, listen, if you want to not have to wear a mask in school next year, get vaccinated. Yeah. And they got vaccinated, and they of course come back to me and say, Daddy, you told me if I got vaccinated.
It's the old dilemma, Jason, isn't it?
I was like, well, blame Biden, don't blame me.
Yeah, it's the old dilemma though, right? Safety versus freedom. That it's the tug of war that we've been having for literally centuries as we've been going through. But it takes smart people to unpack these issues and not to just go ahead and come out with a policy that's a blanket policy that disproportionately impacts faith groups, for example, which is what we're talking about. I think
you're right. I think my wife likes to say she's a little bit surprised sometimes I'm in politics, because she says you like to live in nuance, but nuance doesn't seem to exist in today's political climate. And there's probably some element of truth to that. I have said before, I had a friend of mine who's a libertarian who called me outraged about the idea that private employers could mandate vaccines. And I said, but listen, this is a freedom of contract issue. I mean, if I'm a private employer and I want to say anybody who works for me has to wear green socks every morning, or has to wear a certain uniform, or has to do X, Y, and Z, that's their right as an employer. What I have a problem is when government then tells the employer they have to do X, Y, and Z. But if I'm an employer and I have, say I work at a nursing facility, I have a lot of at risk, or pick whatever the job is, that's your right as an employer to make those, make those type of requirements of your employees, and recognize that. And so, that's kind of probably more of a nuanced position, because I think, you have some talk show hosts out there that are saying, hey, don't take the vaccine at all. I think that's absurd. But listen, it's not. The one thing I don't like how the media has phrased this is they've tried to make this out that the people that are anti-vaccination are all somehow rural Trump voters. And I'm pro-vaccination. I think people should get vaccinated. But trust me, I've met a lot of people that are more holistic, that are some of my friends that definitely lean to the left, shop at Whole Foods for everything. And they've always been anti-vax, they've been pre this, and they're anti-vax now. So the idea that somehow this is, I don't like how the media has portrayed this. And my experience has been the best way to fight bad information is just with good information. I don't think you hector, look down, lecture. I tell people everybody has to reach a conclusion on their own. Statistically speaking, though, it is true that the people that are in ICUs right now in America, that are in ICUs because of COVID, depending on the survey, I've seen one hospital administrator told me it was over 99%. Others have told me it's over 97%. But let's just say it's well north of 95% of everybody that's in ICU right now with COVID is unvaccinated. And so the standard right now that we should be is the vaccines have never, and I've had people say, well, don't take the vaccine because it blocks, people are catching even if they're vaccinated. And I've said, that's not the measure of success. The measure of success is people that, even if they catch COVID, aren't required to be going to the ICU and be hospitalized.
Correct. Absolutely.
That's the standard. And it overwhelmingly has shown that it does that. And so my kind of where I'm at now is anybody who wants a vaccine can get one. If you have a religious objection, that's your right under the Constitution. If you have a health, your medical provider says, listen, there's a situation with your immune system, you shouldn't take it, obviously, but don't mean to necessarily go all the way down the vaccine rabbit hole. But I think
it's the role of government, right?
Yeah.
It's all about the role of government, whether or not things should be mandated, required, what have you. Do we let the facts speak for themselves? Has the FDA or the CDC pursued the correct level of investigation to ensure that these vaccines are safe, et cetera? We know that they have, et cetera. So, it is a role of government thing. It is something that the Attorney General is going to have to think about as to whether or not any action needs to be taken legally, or if there are lawsuits that are brought against the Commonwealth of Virginia. Do you step to the plate and argue the state's attorney, right? As we have seen your predecessor, as your opponent, not go to bat for the Commonwealth of Virginia.
No, he hasn't. And he has brought an ideological element to his office that's kind of stunning to watch. I mean, voter ID, which polling shows even the majority of Democrats, last one I showed 52% of Democrats, well north of 90% of Republicans, north of 70% of independents, understand that photo ID to vote makes a lot of sense. If it, my standard has been, I think it's a good one, is listen, it should be easy to vote and hard to cheat, right? Mm-hmm. And photo ID does that. And we're in this unique position where government, in Virginia Beach, if you want a library card, just to check out a book, you have to have a photo ID to get a library card. You have to have a photo ID. I just drove through CVS have to have a photo ID to pick up my medication, photo ID to get on an airplane. I mean, it's used everywhere. If you want a photo ID in Virginia, it's free. Most people, you don't need a driver's license, just a photo ID, but it helps give people confidence in the integrity of the system. Even though this is legislation that's been passed by the General Assembly and signed by the governor, Mark Herring refused to defend photo ID because of an ideological bias. And then you look at Project Exile. So I'm old enough to remember when Richmond was the murder capital of America.
Yeah.
And very successful program. It was a joint program with the Attorney General and the U.S. Attorney's Office. Says, listen, if you're a felon and use a gun in the commission of a felony, we're going to prosecute you in federal court. We're going to go with mandatory minimums, and we're going to throw your rear end off the streets and in jail. And this has been used very successfully to lower gun violence, right? Mm-hmm. Mark Herring turned down federal grant money from the previous administration because they had a requirement they implemented that said, listen, if you're an illegal immigrant and you use a gun in the commission of a felony, you should notify ICE. I don't think that's unreasonable. If you're here and you broke our laws, you're an illegal immigrant, and then you use a gun in the commission of a felony, yes, you should be deported. You should not be in this country. And Mark Herring decided to push a political agenda and say, no, I'm not going to accept this federal grant money. I'm going to turn down money to prosecute gun violence, all because of that requirement. So I find that laughable whenever Mark Herring wants to talk about how he wants to lower gun violence. You had a chance. You turned down money to do so, and you turned down money to do so because it didn't fit your ideological worldview. I think that speaks volumes about how Mark Herring's failed his job. And now we have a murder rate that's the highest it's been in 2 decades. And so, I was a prosecutor in Virginia Beach, as you know, and my attitude is you go after the bad guys, you go after violent criminals, you get them off our streets so they're not repeat offenders.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up that you were a prosecutor. That was where I wanted to go to next, talk a little bit more about your background and why you feel that, again, you've got the credentials to make it as Attorney General. So you went to William and Mary Law School. You were an assistant Commonwealth attorney here in Virginia Beach. You've been a practicing attorney for many years. What experiences have you gained from that to serve as Attorney General?
Well, I think particularly as a prosecutor, the cases you remember aren't so much the defendants as much as the victims. And you quickly, once you realize and you interact with victims, you realize that in many ways they carry a lot of the same mental scars as somebody who came back from combat, the wrong place at the wrong time. And it affects them greatly. And one of the things that when I walked through this journey last year, having a front row seat in the General Assembly to see the insanity of the legislation they were pushing. They were pushing in bills to reduce from a felony to misdemeanor assaulting of police officers. They voted to end the mandatory reporting requirement of sexual assault in schools. Another bill to end all mandatory minimums for drug dealers, not drug users, drug dealers, including second offense, dealing drugs to a child at a bus stop. In other words, I've dealt drugs to a kid at a bus stop once before. I go to prison, I get out, and I do it again. Still no mandatory minimum or the 50% off your sentence automatically if you're a convicted child pornographer. I had a front row seat, and I realized, you meet with the victim of a crime, and I know that I have said these words, and I know there's so many other prosecutors that I know have said similar words, which is you're talking to a victim trying to convince them to testify again. To testify. And you realize, listen, I know being in the same room as a person that brought you such unimaginable pain is going to be one of the worst experiences of your life. And having to relive those moments is going to require strength that I don't have. But if you do so, I can promise you 2 things. One, I'll be by your side. And then the second, we go through this bad guy isn't going to be able to harm you or another Virginian again, for a very long time. Prosecutors can't say that with those kind of assurances anymore in today's new, progressive Virginia because of this wholesale criminal first, victim last mindset. And so having the perspective of the victim, I think is going to be critical for Attorney General. Having the perspective as well as, I'd be the first Attorney General in 225 years to be the elected Attorney General in Virginia history, to be the child of an immigrant. I think that gives you a unique perspective as well. But I'm a big believer in always never forgetting the victims. And I think that's a critical part in the Attorney General's office. And you could just see with this disaster that is the parole board, that Mark Herring's office, the Attorney General's office, which advises the parole board, forgot completely about the victims. And I think tragically, as a result, and I want to bring that kind of perspective as well. Sure.
And I think law enforcement recognizes that you bring a perspective of having their back as well. Talk about your relationship with the law enforcement community here in Virginia.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we're seeing a mass exodus. We're down 337 police officers and state troopers. We're down over 140 in Norfolk. We're down over 100 officers in Virginia Beach. We're down, an officer told me they're down close to 200 officers in Fairfax. People are like, well, why are you having this mass exodus? Well, it's a matter of leadership or lack thereof. I mean, they are saying that the General Assembly has been trying to end qualified immunity, and they are pushing policies that make their jobs next to impossible. And so crime is up, cops are down. I talked to an officer in Richmond who said last month the total number of traffic tickets they issued for the entire city of Richmond was 17. And he said, our officers were understaffed. Our officers that do go out literally sit in their cars and wait for 911 calls. We're not out trying to get DUIs. We're not doing any type of active policing. We're not driving through neighborhoods letting people know, hey, we're here. We're here to protect you. And so the bad guys are seeing that. And so the first thing, my relationship with law enforcement is when you've been a prosecutor and you work with cops every day, you just build an appreciation for their job, what they do. And I think the second thing is know that I oppose bad policies that end up with bad results. And if there's anything that frustrates me after I've served in the state legislature, it's this naive belief by too many people in government, whether they're elected officials or whether they're just government employees, that somehow good intentions guarantee good results. And it doesn't. And I've seen it time after time after time again. And, I'm going to bring that perspective there. So I was, the Police Benevolent Association, which endorsed me in 2000 and, they endorsed Mark Herring in 2008. No, 2013. So 8 years ago, they endorsed Mark Herring. They endorsed Terry McAuliffe to show you just how much today's Democratic Party has shifted so far to the left. This was an organization that endorsed them just 8 years ago. They asked all the candidates to come in and sit down and interview with them. Terry McAuliffe and Mark Herring didn't even bother to show up. Neither did the lieutenant governor candidate for the Democrats. They blew them off. That should show you just how out of touch and how far left today's Democratic Party is, where it would, I assume, so anger their base that they couldn't even show up and sit down and meet with the police with their concerns. So I'm honored to have their endorsement. They endorsed Glenn Youngkin and Winsome Sears as well. But I'm honored to have the endorsement of the Police Benevolent Association. And so many, I've had multiple sheriffs that have endorsed me. I've had at least 4 Democrat Commonwealth attorneys and Democratic sheriffs that have endorsed me. Sheriff Schuler out in Smith County, who's a Democrat, endorsed me. And he said, listen, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. It left me. Because these anti-police, anti-law enforcement policies have made Virginians fundamentally less safe. And that's why I'm supporting a Republican for the first time in my life. And I think that's significant. And we're seeing that really across the Commonwealth. Law enforcement has kind of reached their breaking point. And I think public safety has become, really for the first time since George Allen was running for governor, really a top issue with Virginia voters this year.
One of the things that we talked about earlier, and one of the things that I appreciate the most about you is, again, that you are nuanced. You do look at policy in a holistic way and try to determine what is the best and most rational approach. It seems, though, that in today's environment, it is very black and white. You are either a demon or an angel. So I'm wondering how you're able to break through the noise and communicate not only to the base of the Republican Party, but also to a majority of independents that will enable you to get over the hump here. I mean, politics is about numbers, and right now the numbers, I don't know what numbers you're seeing, but the last one that I saw didn't seem to be too favorable for you.
Well, there's two polls last week. There were two polls last week. One that had it a 2-point race, another poll that had me up 1.5 points.
Oh. So I have old news. Yay, good.
You have old news.
That makes me feel better.
Right.
That makes me feel better. Good.
We feel great where we are, and we're really excited about the fall. But I think there's a couple things. One, I think that to your point, how you get your message across. Listen, I've always tried to practice what I call aspirational politics. That's kind of how I've always wanted to try to operate. And some of that is just I was raised. I mean, one of my earliest memories was the pride my mother had in taking me with her to vote in her first election, that she could actually vote for her leader when she was 38 years old for Ronald Reagan in 1984. And I think that's a huge part of who I am. And, Reagan made this observation at his first inaugural. He said, how can you claim to love your country if you don't first love your fellow countrymen? Boy, we don't hear that very often, do we?
No, we don't.
And, a wise Marine told me, if you walk along the hills of Arlington National Cemetery, you see those stars of David's and those crosses. You don't see an R or D next to anybody's name. So always be mindful of the fact that somebody that has maybe a very different view on a political issue than you do has given their last full measure of devotion in defense of their country. If there's anything that I would stress to everybody, would be just because somebody differs than you politically doesn't mean they're your enemy. Your enemy are the people that are, overseas trying to subject innocent women because they just want to get an education, and or torture people because they decided to worship God in a manner they disagree with. So those are the people that are your enemies. Definitely not a fellow American. Both parties are guilty of it. And so, quite frankly, is the media. The media loves to do, I forget who was the commentator, but they said the media loves to do nut picking. They pick the extremes of both parties and they put them on the air. They highlight every moronic, idiotic statement they say, and they somehow try to say, see, that's the other side. And I think that's not a good precedent. I think if there's anything I've realized going out in Virginia is people don't live their lives the way the media portrays it, right? I mean, you and I, Tim, have friends that are Democrats, that are liberals, that think on very different issues. I went to William Mary for law school. The vast, vast majority of my friends were very different than me politically, but they're still close friends. And, just because somebody has a different worldview of the size, scope, and role of government doesn't mean that I'm going to think that these people need to be in any way punished or hurt or anything. And but listen, as our culture has gotten more coarse, so as our politics, that doesn't surprise me. So if there's anything that I've tried to do in my own role as a candidate is to try to practice politics that kind of elevates. That doesn't mean I don't have profound differences with Mark Herring that we have been talking about and we'll be talking about through now on Election Day. But I think that, all of those, and I think, listen, a lot of people they know that one party rule in Richmond isn't helping. They desperately think we need a check and balance. The last time the Democratic Party controlled everything in Virginia, the governor, lieutenant governor, AG, state senate, state house, very, very different Democratic Party. Very different. I mean, the House Majority Leader, Dickie Cranwell, was a member of the NRA. I mean, talk about a very different Democratic Party than what it was and what it's been. And we've come a long way since, Doug Wilder, who came in the office and inherited $1 billion deficit. And what he did is he cut spending. Today's Democratic Party is very, very left, very, very woke, very, very far to the left. And think most people recognize we need a check and balance in Richmond, and I'm looking forward to running to provide that check and balance.
I know your time is valuable, and I appreciate you giving me some here today. I just got a couple questions. How do you stop people from characterizing you as an ideologue?
People are going to say dumb, foolish things. That's just the reality. I mean, I think as people get to know me and they hopefully hear from me and hear my messaging, they realize that's,
nonsense.
Listen, no matter what you do in this hyper partisan world we're in, you're gonna have people say, nasty things about you. And, it is kind of funny because my, one of my friends saw some stupid stuff on social media, which I don't pay attention to.
Neither do I.
Said, does that ever bother you? And I said, no. I said, it'll only bother me if people that are close friends or my family start posting things bad about me on social. Then I'll be worried. But what I am to them is I'm a caricature of what they think I am. I'm a caricature of probably watching MSNBC, and like I said, they do nut picking, and they have a caricature. And so it's like a tree falling in the middle of a forest. Okay, that's a caricature they have, but they don't know me. They don't know my heart. They don't know my background or my story. And that's their right. They have every right to say that.
And so
I don't get bothered by it because they don't know me. If they knew me, then I'd be bothered by it, but they don't.
Got it. And someone in the same token, though, what's it like to run as a team with Glenn Youngkin and Winsome Sears?
It's been really awesome getting to know both of them. They're both just generally good people with just huge hearts. I mean, my wife has great judgment, and she remarked that that we went out to dinner with Glenn and his wife Suzanne, and my wife's just great judgment. And she said, we live in a time where we have so many politicians that have thin skin and coarse hearts. It'd be so great to see somebody like Glenn Youngkin elected who has a thick skin and a big heart. And I was like, wow, you get Glenn to a T. I mean, he's been a great running mate. It's been so fun to both run with him. And quite frankly, it's been even better to get to know him on a personal level. He is a real deal. He's a man of both of sincere faith, but a huge heart who loves people. And, he's 6'6", 6'7". So my staff likes to joke that when I go out with him, I should bring a stool that I can stand on because I look like him as a kid. I'm 45. I'm not that young, but he definitely, I like to joke, he's literally the top of the ticket.
There you go.
But he is a good man with a great heart. I think he'd be a remarkable governor. I do.
So if you're saying if I ever have the chance, it will be a sit-down interview. So yeah, if you're vertically challenged, y'all know where I'm standing. So awesome.
That's great. Hopefully we'll get that you guys can get connected.
And have you been able to connect with Winsome as well?
Yeah, Winsome's awesome. Sincere woman of faith. Just an incredible story. I mean, she's a child of an immigrant as well, and she's lived an extraordinary life, as you know. I mean, kind of shocked the political world when she won her seat in Norfolk. And I've enjoyed so much getting to know her on the campaign trail, and she's so passionate about. She's really I mean, obviously, I talk a lot about public safety because of that element of the AG's office, but she is equally as passionate as I am on public safety on kids trapped in failing schools. That animates her so much. And I so respect the fact that she's a champion of that. And she has a saying that I love, and I quote her on the campaign trail when we're not together. But Winsome likes to say, America is not where she should be, but she sure as heck isn't what she used to be either. And I think that's amazing.
That's a great comment.
And it kind of gets dovetail into what I say we're a nation of second chances. There's not a country in the world that has given more second chances from more people from more countries and more racial backgrounds and more faith backgrounds than the United States. There's just not. And guess what? It's okay to celebrate that. It's okay to celebrate as much as we maybe fall short of our ideals, to celebrate that fact. And I think Winsome is just a great running mate, an example of that. And very proud to call her a friend.
Again, I really appreciate the fact that you were able to join me today. I know you probably got a million other events that you have to run off to
I do.
here in the near future. So let's close it with this. First, what are your parting thoughts, and then let people know where they can find you and maybe contribute to your campaign, or just keep tabs on your thoughts and ideas.
Well, I guess my kind of closing thoughts is, I think we're at an inflection point in Virginia. I think the decisions we make in the next 2 months will kind of decide the course of Virginia for the next 20 years. I also think Virginians are ready to make a statement. I really do. I feel that out, the energy and the crowds and the intensity we're seeing out there of people that want a check and balance. They don't want one party rule in Richmond. They want to end this, I call this far left liberal monopoly. And I mentioned Ronald Reagan's one of my favorite presidents for a variety of reasons. But he made this observation about the unique nature of our country. And if there's anything I want to leave, a truth I want to leave for anybody who's listening or watching this podcast, is to not forget that wherever you're sitting right now, there are millions of people on this planet. Some that would crawl over broken glass, some that would cling to the side of an airplane, that would do everything in their power to be seated wherever you're seated right now. That's to be an American. That's an amazing gift. It's just amazing. It also is a unique privilege, which is to vote. And I don't think anybody that's listening should in any way diminish that. They have something precious as most people would die for. But Ronald Reagan made this observation about the unique character of who we are as a people. He said, of all the countries in the world, the United States is the only country, the only one, in which our national anthem actually ends in a question mark. Are we still the land of the free and the home of the brave? And I think literally that is a question that's on the ballot this fall. And I think Virginians are ready to say yes. One of my other favorite world leaders is Winston Churchill, who said Americans will always do the right thing after they've exhausted all other options. I think Virginians are ready to do the right thing and vote this year. And so as far as people want to get involved and supportive, they can go to my website, either my name, jasonmiyares.com, or if you want to have a website that directs you directly to it, it's just jason4ag.com. That's Jason, the number 4ag.com. You can email the campaign. You can email me, jason@jasonmiyares.com as well. But Jared, great to connect with you. Great to see you again. Hopefully in person. Maybe we can grab a beer at some point when this is all done and catch up in person instead of Zoom. But I appreciate you having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
It's been fantastic, Jason. It's wonderful to see you again. And I will definitely take you up on that after the election for sure. Hopefully we can raise a glass and toast Attorney General-elect Jason Miyares. Delegate Jason Miyares, candidate for Attorney General. Make sure you get out there. Early voting actually is starting now. So get out there and make it happen. Jason,
thank you.
Thanks again for your time.
Thanks. God bless. Thanks.